Tell me a little bit about your mom and dad.
Well, my mom was a member of the Northrop family in Ellicottville. She had 5 sisters, and the Northrops, of course, are very well known in Ellicottville.
Sure.
Her cousin Bill, she started Holiday Valley. And my dad was kind of all over everywhere. He was one of the first milk inspectors, and he worked in Wyoming County, Perry. And his dad was a Methodist minister, and they had a cottage, as I recall, as a young kid at Silver Lake. And we went up there on quite a few occasions to visit them and so forth. And then my dad, after the inspection routine, he got into selling cars.
Okay.
And he sold for 4 or 5 dealerships in Chautauqua County. And that's pretty much, he did, during the war, he was working at the American Brass in Buffalo for a short while. Hi, Randy. And, but other than that, why, he was just on the go, and his nickname was Speed.
Speed?
Yeah.
Why was that?
I really don't know, but I know everybody called him Speed. Yeah.
Was he interested in sports? Did he have time to have an interest in sports?
No, he followed me around a little bit when I started getting into things. But other than that, he really just kind of a fan, didn't partake himself.
I know you were born in Alden.
Yep.
And March 13th, 1929.
Yep.
And grew up in Little Valley?
Yep. Well, actually, I was in Perry for my kindergarten, 1st grade years. Then we moved to Ellicottville in the 30s, and I went to school there, I think through 6th grade. Then we came to Little Valley. Came to Little Valley in 1940.
Okay. So you're in Little Valley in 1940. I got to ask the question. 1 year after that, 1941. Do you remember December 7th, 1941?
Yep. I was in my friend's. He and I and my buddy were playing Cowboys and Indians in his backyard, and it was a really big deal because he had 2 twin brothers. They were both stationed at Honolulu or Corregidor, one of those places, and one of them survived and one didn't.
Oh gosh. So the message came out on a Sunday. Do you remember it being discussed among your family members at all?
Oh yeah, but I can't tell you specifically, but it was certainly was a big deal all over, everywhere.
Yeah. So being a kind of 11-year-old, and actually having your friends lose somebody in the service, what did that mean to your community? When there's
Well, I can remember vividly the blackouts that we had, and of course all the schools in Chautauqua and I think probably Chautauqua County too had scrap drives, and I can remember the huge piles of scrap. They let all the high schoolers out on Friday, and they just went all over everywhere and brought in everything they could get their hands on that people let them get, and it ended up in a pile in front of the school.
Wow.
And I remember people driving all over the county to look at each school's scrap drive, and it was really a big deal. And I can remember also during the blackouts, everybody would go up on the local hills because at the magic hour, 8 o'clock or 7, whatever it was, all the lights were supposed to go out. And invariably there was one left on somewhere. And I was the messenger, so I was kind of a big deal for me. I got on my bike, and remember I went down to the municipal building, and they would give me a message, and I took it wherever they wanted me to take it. But yeah, I had a lot of good memories of that.
Well, at that, because of the blackouts, then were there wardens who actually would have gone to that person's house, for example?
Yeah, oh yeah, they were notified if there was a light on. Somebody went and said, "Hey, turn your lights out."
Wow. What about rations? Was that part of your?
Oh yeah, yep, I can remember that vividly. Yep, and I'm trying to think if we had stamps. If I recall, maybe we had stamps that we used to get certain items with. But oh yeah, I remember the rationing.
And did you remember your mother or your dad talking about, gee, we're doing this for the war, but we don't have enough meat, or any sort of, how that affected your daily routine?
Well, I'm sure it did to some extent. My mother was such a great cook. She ended up making hash or whatever, and we survived. I don't remember that being a real big deal because we always ate.
The war ends in 1945, victory in Europe and then victory in Japan. Did Little Valley celebrate? Do you remember the bells ringing or something?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the whole county, celebrated to some extent. And I had a brother that was in the Navy, and of course that meant a lot. But yeah, it certainly was a big deal.
Well, also tell me, family-wise, at some point, brother comes home, knocks on the door, and says, "I'm back." Do you remember that day?
Well, sort of. Yeah, he was served on the SS Wantuck. And came back home and had a lot of fond memories. Told me a lot of stories about his experience. And I'm trying to think where the Wantuck and the sailors got together someplace. I'm trying to think of where it was. But I know that once a year or so he went someplace and visited, evidently with former buddies and so forth.
Was he in the Pacific? Was that where he was, or in the Atlantic?
Yeah, they ended up in the Pacific.
Yeah.
Yeah. He remembered being dive bombed, and he had some really great stories to tell me and my brother and my sister.
Now, in the scheme of things, he was your older brother, right?
Right.
And then what's the other pecking order?
I was number 2, and I had a brother John, number 3, and a sister Helene. Both Russ and John have passed, and my sister Helene lives in not too far from Sonora in California. And I visited her with my buddy, same guy I was on What's My Line with. He let us, Susan and I went out to visit them in San Diego, and we took his car and we drove up to my sister's place, and she's living with her son and his wife, and had a nice visit.
So you graduate in 1947.
I graduated in 46 and PG'd in 47.
Oh, okay.
I didn't want to get out of school. I remember my dad saying, "Art, you got to get out of school." But I was having a good time, and it was a good thing because I had a good year athletically. I was a terrible student, and made the dean's list my graduate year in college. That's hard to believe, but yeah, I PG'd and had a good year in baseball, basketball, football, and it kind of was a springboard for me to get involved in phys ed and so forth.
Was there an aha moment? I mean, your dad wasn't involved in athletics. Was there somebody who kind of said, "Art, I think you got some talents," or did it just come up organically through high school?
Well, Thornton Newhouse was our high school coach. He came to Little Valley in 1946, and he did very well. And of course, I really really thought he was a great guy, and he was very positive in his talking to me about. That's how I happened to go to Ithaca. Actually, I was working on in Cattaraugus Cutlery on a degreaser, and I remember had a very high ether content, and I remember having to go out about every 20 minutes or so, open the door and go out and breathe some fresh air and come back in. And I went uptown after my session at the Cattaraugus Cutlery one night, and a guy named Bob Bergholz, who ended up coaching at Pine Valley and Chautauqua in later years, he was there, and we were friends because of high school baseball and so forth. He was from Cattaraugus. We got shooting the breeze, and he said, "Hey, why don't you come back to Western Illinois with me?" I said, "You're kidding me. They wouldn't let me in the door." He said, "They let me in." And anyway, he actually talked me into it. He had a application. I took it up to Art Memmott, who was the principal at Little Valley at the time, and I think he was shocked too. But he was a great guy, and he helped me out. Anyway, I had a 1932 Rockney. That was a sports car made by Studebaker that I had purchased for $175 or something, I don't know. 75 maybe. And we jumped in my car and headed for Macomb, Illinois.
Really?
And I lasted 2 years. And again, I was getting C's and D's and an occasional F. And of course, the Korean War hit. And I got a phone call from my mother. And in a conversation, she told me about 3 of my good friends from Olean and Salamanca were going to go in the next draft contingent. And I said, "Mom, you call the draft board and sign me up right now," because I knew they were taking anybody below a B average. And of course, I was fair game. And anyway, I went back home, got drafted, went to Fort Dix for my basic, and took a light infantry basic. And I can remember our drill sergeant, when he was talking to us about what's going to happen, he didn't say if, he said when you do this and when you do that. And so we were pretty sure we were headed right for the front lines in Korea. So we were sitting around my bunk at the end of our basic training session, knowing that in the next week we were going to be shipped out. And sat there with my buddies from Olean, Salamanca, sat there shooting the breeze and said, because a lot of guys were doing everything in their power to get out of going to Korea. They were signing up for cadre and a bunch of stuff. We sat there and, hey, whatever happens, happens. We're ready. Would you know that all those guys that tried to beat it ended up going? They sent me and every one of those guys that was on that bunk to Germany. And I went to a place called Sandhaven, which was a beautiful mural place that was evidently used by the German hierarchy. And I know I was assigned to General Handy's quarters as an honor guard. And I pulled that duty for about, I'm going to say a couple of months, and they had a tryout for the post baseball team. And me and a kid named Cyril Munka from Exeter, Pennsylvania, decided we'd give it a whirl. We both made it. And I had a successful baseball season as a pitcher, an occasional center fielder, mostly pitching. And at the end of the baseball season, this lieutenant came after me. He says, "You play football?" I told him what my football experience was, and geez, I ended up on the football team as a wide receiver and a safety, free safety. In the football, it was all over again. Guy said, "You play basketball?" I told him what my basketball experience was, and anyway, went out with the team and made it. So I went from baseball to football to basketball, to baseball to football to basketball. And I was playing with the Heidelberg Hawks, who were very, very successful in UCOM in 1951 and 52. And in 1952, I was pitching in a preliminary to the GI World Series in Munich. And I remember I went over and get a drink of water before the game, and I sat down, and I've been there maybe 2 minutes. This black kid came over and sat down next to me. I looked at him. I said, "Don't I know you?" He said, "Hi, my name's Ernie." It was Ernie Banks.
My God.
And we sat there and shot the breeze for 15 minutes or so, and I got him 2 out of the 4 times that day.
That puts you in high cotton.
He was awful nice fella. You know, I never forgot that little session we had. That was important. So at the end of my routine, we had one more interesting experience. At the end of the basketball season, we were invited to a sports festival in London, and we flew over in a C-47, and one of the co-pilots I knew, and he had told me before we took off, he said, "We get up there pretty good, come on up front." Excuse me. And so I did that. And I remember flying over that doggone North Sea and looking down through at the ships that were in the ocean there. And everything was beautiful. And all of a sudden, I heard the co-pilot talk to the pilot, and he said, "It's going to get rough." I looked up, and we've been sailing through pretty smooth weather with big cumulus clouds around, but we always had a spot. And all of a sudden, there was no spot. He said, "All right, you better go back and buckle up." And I did, and pretty soon, you know, we were dancing around in those clouds. Anyway, we made it to England, London, went to the sports festival, had a chance to go down, saw the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace and a bunch of stuff like that, you know. Had an interesting place, but the doggone basketball court was in a hangar, cement floor. I remember it was. And after that, why, you know, we came back, and as we were flying back, we were sitting together back there playing hearts, and somebody said, "Looked at what time are we supposed to land?" He said, "Oh, about 45 minutes. All of a sudden, you know, the bottom dropped right out. Holy mackerel, we're going right in the ocean. Landed. My buddy came out of the front of the plane. He said, "Sorry about that, guys, but we had a 100-knot tailwind, and it just increased our time." Shortened up the time, actually. And then after that, why, you know, got back into the Army routine.
And this is in Germany.
Yeah, this is all in Germany. Yep. And I can remember. Wow, I can remember the trip, especially going over the boat trip across the North Sea. I was billeted down not too far from where the doggone prop was, because every now and then, you know, as the back of the ship would come out, no, you know, it'd shake. Then I remember going up to get breakfast, and all the stairwells were full of vomit. You know, the ship would roll and the stuff, but we had a lot of the Air Force guys on board, and a lot of them obviously got seasick. But that was a graphic memory, as vomit flying back and forth. Came back, you know, eventually came back to the States, and you know, I trying to get back into my old routine. That's when my good buddy Sanders and I got shooting the breeze. Let's. He had a friend called Mutt, and he had a restaurant in Cape Cod called Mutt's Place. So we thought maybe we'd go out there and work for the summer. Jumped in. He had a 1939 Plymouth. I remember we took off for Massachusetts and pulled up. When we found the place, I said, Sanders, let's see what's going to happen here. And just about after we'd been there for 15, 20 minutes, it was time to serve down there. And man, the people came in there. And I said, Sanders, you sure we want to do this? I don't know. Let's go to Florida. We turned around that turnpike. I had my window rolled down. He had one leg out the window this way, had the throttle pulled out of the car. I had my leg out the other way. I had both feet out, I think. And boy, we got stopped by a trooper. We hadn't gone more than 2 miles. Trooper stopped us and gave us holy hell verbally. And we told him we were, what we were doing. He said, listen, you guys, I want you to get the H out of here. Don't ever come back to Massachusetts. And he let us go. And we headed for Florida. And on the way down, I stopped. I can't even remember the name of the place. I stopped and I made a phone call home to my mother. She said, I'm glad you called. You had a call from Olean wanting you to report to training camp. I said, really? Where's the camp? She said, Old Okie Beach, Maryland. So Sanders dropped me. That's where we went to. He let me out. I remember going to a local store and buying a baseball glove. I didn't have it with me, Yeah. And went to the spring training tryout. And evidently I performed well enough so that the guy in charge told whoever else he was in charge there that he wanted me to be part of it. So then Sanders went on to Florida, and I came back to Western New York with a baseball bunch.
Did they ever explain how they got your name? Was there some scout? Was there some free guy that said, "Hey"?
I just assumed that they kept track of what was going on in the GI World Series and so forth, and that's the only way that they could have known, really, other than what I did in high school, and I played freshman ball at Western Illinois, but I have an idea that it was probably my experience in Germany that was the ticket.
Well, you were both a center fielder, an outfielder, and a pitcher. What was your main strength? You were known as a pitcher?
In high school ball, I pitched and played center field. And then I remember when I think it was either my junior or senior year, a fellow from East Otto named Harry Hansen came after me in Little Valley and wanted me to pitch for the East Otto town team. So I did. I remember he had a slang word that he always used. Everything of it was good. It was gooder than hogturd. I never forgot that. Anyway, I played with East Otto for, I think, a summer, part of it. Then Bill Gowan and Howard Hinman from Cattaraugus came after me and wanted me to play with Cattaraugus, which I did. And I played with them when I came home from Western Illinois in the summer. And, I was with those guys for quite a long time. They were in that was Suburban League, Buffalo News Suburban League.
That's the Cattaraugus Merchants?
Cattaraugus Merchants, yeah. Yep. And
Was it a semi-pro team? Did they pay you to play?
No, no. It was a
Weekend?
strictly a town team.
Okay.
Yeah. And I enjoyed. They had a lot of fun. They had some real nice ball players. And then I spent a season later on with Salamanca in their league. I remember playing Jamestown in that one year. And then when I came back after my experience with Olean and started teaching at Cassadaga in '57, that's when I got together with Jack Fulford and Jim Hannon and Dave Wilcox and those guys and played with them in the Inner City League down here. But yeah, I had some real good experiences with baseball.
Now talk about Olean. I mean, how ironic that you get a call, show up in Maryland, and then you're placed on a team with the Yankees in Olean.
Yeah.
You're not that far from home.
You know, they were coming up, obviously, on their way from the south.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was, I guess I was just in the right spot at the right time. Somebody up there was looking after me.
Well, tell me about the Olean team of this would have been the Pony League at the time, or the New York Penn League? Had they changed?
Yeah, Pony League.
Okay.
Yep, yep.
What kind of team was it, and who was your manager?
Well, we started out a guy named Bill Davison. He was an old dog, you know, and he stayed with us I think about a month, and then a guy named Wally Lance took over, and he was there for the rest of my duration. Nice fella, you know. I can remember I was pitching. I had a no-hitter going at Corning, and Tony Lupin was managing Corning at the time. And somehow I had gotten him for a couple of times. And I think it was the top of the ninth inning. I had, the game was close. We were winning like something like 2 or 3 to nothing. And I remember Tony Lupin was the next hitter, and Wally Lance called timeout, and he came up to me and he said, well, no, let me rephrase that. Tony Lupin got up and he foul tipped the first pitch. Then I got a called strike on him. And Wally Lance called time and came out. And I think I had walked a player, and there's a guy either on first or second base. Can't remember for sure. Wally Lance took time. He says, "Walk him." He said, "I got 2 strikes on him, Coach." He looked at me like, "You dummy," you know. He didn't say it, but he looked that way. Turned around and stalked back to the dugout. Anyway, the next pitch I threw to him, he hit it off the center field scoreboard. We won the and he jerked me immediately, and a big kid named Ed Andrews came in and struck out the next whoever it was and ended the ball game. I think we won something like, 2 to 3 to 2 or 4 to 2 or something. But yeah, that was an interesting experience. Ba-boom.
Manager, so you're walking in, he pulls you out. Did he say anything like, "Come on, why didn't you listen to me"?
Oh, he just when I walked back into the dugout, he looked like he didn't say it, but I could just see his expression. "You dummy," Interesting thing was, after the game, I went over to get a drink of water, and Tony Lupin walked up and he patted me on the back. He said, "Art," he said, "you got a nice fastball. What you got to do, you got to work on your changeup." Now, this is Corning's manager. I said, "Well, he said, I'm not really sure how to," he said, "with your fastball, all you got to do is shove it back in your hand farther, so you got all 3 fingers controlling the ball. Make the very same motion, come over the top." So I worked on that, and I was able to use it later a little.
Now, that year you also had a guy named Richardson.
Bobby Richardson, yep.
What was he like?
He was just a heck of a nice guy. Very religious. And when I played with him, he was a line drive hitter. And just a real nice young man. And very impressive. Like I say, line drive hitter, played second base for Olean. And then I can remember.
What year, by the way, what year was this?
1953.
Okay.
And I can remember I went to Ithaca when I got done with my Olean session. And I remember, of course, Ithaca had great baseball teams. And I remember that when Binghamton came up from spring training, they always played the Bombers, Ithaca. And Bobby Richardson at that time was playing with Binghamton. And when they come up there, I was down there. I couldn't play because I'd had a pro experience, see. And matter of fact, the only thing I was able to do at Ithaca is I became a member of the college gym team because there was no interscholastic competition. There were a lot of demonstrations, that type of thing. Anyway, I saw Richardson when they were wearing. I noticed Bobby Richardson. He sat down and shot the breeze. I said, "So how you doing?" And we had a nice talk about it. And he said, I said, "How you hitting the ball?" He said, "Well, I guess pretty good." And he, in a conversation with his manager, he said, "Bob, don't worry, but with your swing, it's going to happen." And of course, he was right. I'm not sure how many home runs he hit when he was with the Yankees, but he did, and he had some very successful seasons with them, as you know.
Bruno, 1960.
Yeah,
MVP.
yeah. Awful nice fella. Yeah.
Were there other players on the team that you kind of remember, or?
I can't remember anybody else making. I remember a lot of the guys. I can't remember anybody else making it to the big leagues. I think Don Johnson might have gotten an experience with I'm not sure. And other than that, I'm not sure what those guys ended up doing.
You remember any humorous incidents, kind of like, Greg, you're not going to believe this story concerning this game or that, or anything that was sort of humorous?
Oh. I guess one of the, as I look back at my own experience, another story you'd be interested in. We were sitting, when I was still overseas now, I'm going back a few years, we had a black kid named Bishop Taylor, who was an exceptional pitcher, a nice guy. And I remember he and I were sitting in the bullpen, and I'm not sure who we were playing, but we were sitting in the bullpen together, and I was sitting there was a bench there, and I was sitting on the upper part of the bench. And Taylor was next to me. He said, "Arthur," he said, "what you need is a chew." And he always had a lump in his chin, where he had a. And I said, "What?" He said, "It might help your fastball." So anyway, he gave me a little wad, and I said, "What do I do with this?" And he told me how to use it. I sat there, and then, about 10 minutes later, all of a sudden things started to go, whoo, and I went backwards off the bench. Honest to the Lord. And I remember he came running around and picked me up and said, "Yeah, sorry about that." He said sorry. But yeah, Bishop Taylor.
Oh, man.
And another guy that I always remembered, his name was Snuffy Grimm. He was one of those guys that he could really hit the ball. But I remember him real well too. But to answer your question, I can't think of many humorous things while I was playing with Olean. But I can tell you this, that when the last ball game of that season, they moved to Vets Park in Salamanca because they figured me being a local kid, it would, draw. And I can't remember if it did or not. But anyway, I pitched the ball game, and I think we were playing Bradford. And along about I'm going to say the eighth inning, I was throwing heat all the time. And I felt something go. And that's when I hurt that rotator cuff. And I remember Wally Lance, took me out of the ball game after that and so forth. But I do remember that after the season was over and I got home, and I was thinking all about Ithaca. That's where Pete Newhouse had been, and he certainly, made me think that way. And I got a call from Joe Frieza, who was the Yankee scout in this area. He said, "Can you still run?" I said, "Why?" He said, "I got a spot for you in the Canadian League." I said, "Nope." I told him, I hurt that shoulder, and I'm going to put baseball behind me. I'm going to work on my master's degree, but thank you anyway. And ever since then, Greg, I second-guessed myself. That might have been my shot at center field had I taken him up on it. But after that, why, it was all history.
Well, you then became, got your master's, phys ed, as I recall.
Yeah.
And then you went to Henrietta, is that right? Was that next?
That was my first. I had one interesting experience. I told you I was on the Ithaca College gymnastics team, and we went around and gave demonstrations and so forth at high schools, and we were at SOTUS, I remember. And I had a routine on the flying rings, and as I came forward in the getting ready, I was getting ready to do whatever I was doing then. The right-hand thing came off the I-beam, and I did a pirouette in the air and landed, would you believe, on a pile of mats.
Oh my God. Wow.
So again, somebody was looking out after me up there.
Oh my golly, yeah.
Yeah. But I really enjoyed that experience. Met a lot of good guys, of course. And then when I was working on my master's degree, I met a guy named Bill Farrell. Bill Farrell's the guy that started the state championships in, I think, basketball. He was very instrumental in getting that going. And he was the athletic director at Rush Henrietta. And we were both going after our masters at the same time, see? So I said, absolutely. And so he lived in, he and his wife Joyce lived in Henrietta. And I went there for, I was in my second year, and came back to Ithaca to, like I say, to work on that master's, finish the master's. And during the vacation, I was doing part-time work at Lansing Central School. I had 2 or 3 little classes, elementary classes. And I met a guy named Clark Carnell. And as it turned out, Clark Carnell and J. Arthur France, who was the principal of Casadega, Superintendent of Casadega, were on a state committee together. And Bob Wade, I don't know if you know that name, great guy, good athlete, was working at Casadega, and he was leaving for Long Island. So they needed a phys ed guy. And Clark Carnell told Art France, recommended me. Well, I wanted to get back in this area, so, it all worked out.
I would say. So now you are coaching. What's the big transition of just becoming a coach? From a player, you're a player, you learn from people, but now you got to impart information.
Well, number one, I was in the elementary phys ed. I had K through 6 in the elementary. Then I taught some middle school classes at the high school. But I really enjoyed my job with the kids, and it really got into the program. And of course, Ken Depledge was his last year at Casadega, and Joe Anarella, of course, was the high school phys ed coach, and I got to meet both those guys and so forth, and I got the assistant job in football, and I took the boys varsity basketball team. That's what Bob Wade had, and I took over the varsity boys baseball team. So I had assistant football, basketball, baseball, and then eventually, after I was there for quite a few years, I got involved with the middle school basketball program, and then eventually assisted Ray Vaness and then Mark Peterson with the girls program, basketball program. So I kind of had a lot of different experiences. Liked them all and really enjoyed it.
You also not only coached, you were an official.
Yeah.
How do you find time for all this stuff?
Yeah, well, they were glad to see me put a striped shirt on because I was probably a pain in the neck from the sidelines when I was coaching, challenging. Actually one time, don't put this in paper, but
No, we don't.
I'm trying to think, I can't think of the official's name. At that time, Donnie Crandall, who was a heck of a ball player, we were playing Fredonia. He drove the baseline, and a Fredonia kid came after him, made contact, and drove him right into the wall. The official gave Fredonia the ball. I was upset. And as he came by me, I reached out and grabbed him by the shirt. I never got a technical.
If somebody grabbed your shirt,
experience I wasn't very proud of, but I'll always remember that. Yeah.
as you many years at Casadega, my gosh, what were they over?
I was 37.
37. A native of Little Valley, Asquith teaching career spanned from 1957 to 1992, and you continued to coach through 2006, 2007. That's a lot of time. A lot of kids. Were there a couple of kids that not necessarily were outstanding, but a name or two you'd say that kid didn't have any talent at all, but through hard work and dedication, he became a somebody.
Well, of course, I thought I had a lot of real good ball players, and one of the things I loved about where I was coaching was the kids really jumped into things. They were, a lot of them didn't have a whole lot monetarily, but they really jumped into the program, and I never had to say, "Come on, let's go." They were always gung ho and very supportive. But I remember I had a kid named Lauren Mars, and boy, he could hit the ball, and I thought he was a minor league prospect right off the bat. And matter of fact, he got an opportunity to do that and didn't take it. And I got a letter from him later on in the years apologizing to me that the fact that he didn't follow up on that. Yeah. But I had some kids that really had some great ability.
Asquith Gymnasium. What was that day like when they renamed it?
I guess they ran out of things to do. I don't. That was very humbling, and it was just a great thing in my life. Yeah, that was something. Well, you were
I
there.
was there. But I remember, Art, was that your whole family was there.
Yep.
And how proud they were.
My brother Russ's kids were there. Yep.
I remember Judy was there, and she was beaming, and on and on and on.
Both my daughters were
Proud.
there. Susan and
Yep.
Ann were
Yep.
there. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that was really something.
So you're teaching, you're officiating, and you have time to hit that little white ball successfully, so much so that they've even, not only have you organized senior golf events, but they've named the golf tour after you.
I started that in 2004. I thought about it actually for 3 or 4 years before I did it. And you know, I'm sitting there doing something. One day I said to my wife, I said, you know, doggone it, I'm going to call Stan Marshall. Because see, I had set the cups at Chautauqua. I set the cups up there for 30 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I told Stan what I had in mind. He said, great idea. And then he's the guy that came up with the Stableford system, you know, that we used, they've used it ever since. And so that, you know, that really worked out good. As I recall, you know, I called the Post Journal and I called the Observer and maybe somebody else, told them what I was doing, and they, you know, they put an article in the paper. And I think that first year I ended up with, I had 42 guys or something like that. The next year I had 62, and then it went boom. I had over 200 guys. And then what has happened over the years is that spur groups have dropped off, groups of 12, 15 guys, and the golf courses have given them a good price. You know, so, and now we're taking anywhere from 75 to 90 guys wherever we go.
So talk about the tour itself. I mean, you go from course to course to course, right?
Yeah, we go all over Western New York and Pennsylvania. And the year I started, Cable Hollow had a deal, $22 with a pop and a hot dog. So I jumped on that. And we started out the same way, $22 with a pop and a hot dog. Now we're paying 25 to 26 with a pop and a hot dog wherever we go. So that's still pretty good.
Is right. And do you have a championship at the end of the year? Just sort of
We have a banquet at South Hills, and we give prizes out to guys that, if anybody had gotten an eagle during the season, you know, we keep track of all this stuff, obviously. You see it in the paper every now and then. Yeah. And so the guys in each category, you know, we give them some little goodie, a little cup or something, a prize, and have a nice meal. And yeah, it's turned out to be a good thing.
As we kind of wrap this up, Art, this has been phenomenal. Thank you. I mean, you're very articulate and have a great recall.
Oh.
You know, better than Randy and I at this point. And so, is there a question you kind of anticipated that I would mention? Because you knew you were coming. You voluntarily said, I'll do this, as you're driving down saying, I wonder if they'll ask me about this, that we haven't.
I feel I've been very fortunate. You know, for some reason my health has held up, and I've always been pretty, I was on the ski patrol for 25 years, you know, and so I've managed to stay active, and maybe that's contributed to my longevity, if that's what you want to call it. But and I've known such great people, guys like yourself, and the guys in the coaching field, and guys in the officiating field, guys like McTavish, and you know, Shirt Hardenberg, and oh Lord, I can't even, so many of them. They're all great guys. Parkey, you know, Lyle Parkhurst, just great group of guys. I've been very, very fortunate. I've had a lot of support from the people that I was associated with, and fortunately I had a certain amount of success. And my old buddy Bob Wade just passed away last year. A lot of great memories, Greg. A lot of great memories.
I'm so glad you shared them here today, and you'll drive out and say, I forgot to mention this, so call Randy. He'll fill us in. But thank you for being part of the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame. And
well, I'll tell you what, you guys you've done a tremendous job, Randy, with this program. And this is just unreal. You know, we started at that one little room over there, and boom. This place is just something that you'll be proud of the rest of your life.
well, he has plans for the entire hotel, so stay tuned. The hotel owners just don't know it yet.
It's just amazing. Every time I walk in here, I just can't believe it.
Well, thank you so much, Art. I appreciate you coming in today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.